So when we think about learning, it's usually classrooms, right? Textbooks, formal lessons, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the traditional picture. Schools, institutions.
But if you actually stop and think about it, so much of the really deep learning, the stuff that shapes us, happens completely outside those walls.
Absolutely. It's everywhere. Your family, your friends, your neighborhood.
Even just people you bump into, it's like this constant informal education, a hidden curriculum almost.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the lessons are, well, they're flexible, aren't
Yeah.
they? Your teacher might say, don't swear, but your mates might teach you it's actually cool, earns you respect.
Or that bending the rules is okay sometimes, maybe even necessary.
Exactly. It's that informal learning, that powerful, sometimes contradictory teaching that we're really diving into today.
Right. And specifically how it connects to the materials you shared on social learning theory.
Mm.
It's this fascinating idea that crime itself, the motivations, the how-to,
Yeah.
it's actually taught.
Yeah, that's the core of it. So our mission today is to unpack that. We'll look at where the theory came from, how it developed,
Dig into the actual ways crime is supposedly learned according to this idea.
and then think about what it all means, for understanding why crime happens and maybe even what we can do about it.
It feels like it's about more than just crime, though. It's about understanding those social forces that are always shaping us, often without us even realizing.
Definitely. It's about those networks of influence we're all tangled up in.
Okay, so let's get into the core idea then. Social learning theory basically says our interactions with people, groups, institutions teach us the norms and values that guide how we act.
That's it. And what's really key, I think, from the sources is how it shifts the focus. It's less about what's going on inside someone's head,
Right.
biologically or psychologically, you know.
And more onto their surroundings, their environment.
Exactly. The environment is framed as the educator.
Yeah.
It teaches you what's okay and what's not okay in that particular context.
So if you're in an environment where crime is common or even encouraged,
You're essentially learning crime. The theory sees that. And while it doesn't ignore schools or anything formal, it places huge emphasis on peer groups, your friends, your close circle.
that's where the real lessons stick, maybe.
Often, yeah. That's where the intense learning happens.
It's a powerful thought. Your friends can literally, maybe without even meaning to, kind of train you. The
Mm.
theory gives examples, right? Like a peer group normalizing drug use.
Yeah. Or even dealing. It makes something illegal seem acceptable, maybe even desirable within that specific group.
It's not about textbooks then, it's about what you absorb from the people closest to you.
Right. It's not just bad company in a vague sense. It's like there's this specific um, curriculum being taught in those close circles.
Yeah.
It can fundamentally reshape how you see right and wrong.
Okay, so where did this all start? You mentioned Edwin Sutherland.
Yes, Edwin Sutherland, he's really central. He was working back in the 1930s, University of Chicago. Wrote a hugely influential textbook called Criminology.
And he developed the first version of this theory, the one called differential association.
That's the one, differential association theory. His core argument was pretty radical for the time. He said that if you associate closely with people who hold antisocial or delinquent views,
You don't just see it, you pick it up. You adopt those views.
exactly, they get passed on. And he particularly noted this happening in what he called disorganized zones.
Disorganized zones? What did he mean by that? Like rough neighborhoods?
Sort of, yeah. Areas with weak community ties, lots of people moving in and out, maybe fewer strong social institutions or controls. He thought these places made it easier for criminal patterns to take root and spread.
Okay. And he formalized this later.
He did. In the Principles of Criminology, 1947, he laid out these 9 propositions, and the first one was a bombshell.
Which was?
Criminal behavior is learned. It's not something you're born with, not biological destiny. It's learned. Simple as that.
Wow. Okay, so not in your genes, it's in your social life. How did he say this learning actually happens?
Through interaction, talking, watching, participating with other people. But crucially, he said it's mainly within your intimate personal groups.
Your family,
Yeah.
your closest friends.
Yes. Those are the people who have the real influence, the most profound impact.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Based on the material you sent, he said you learn both the how and the why.
Exactly. The techniques and the motivations.
So, like, learning to pick a lock is the technique, but learning why you'd use that skill to rob a bank instead of just opening your own jammed door, that's the motivation part.
Precisely. And that motivation, that value system that says robbing the bank is okay or necessary, That's learned too. Lots of skills themselves aren't inherently criminal, right? Driving fast, handling money.
Yeah, but it's the learned justification, the definition, as he called it, that pushes it towards crime. That seems like the critical switch.
It really is. And Sutherland said crime happens when these definitions favorable to lawbreaking basically outweigh or outnumber the definitions favorable to obeying the law.
So it's like a tipping point in what you've learned.
Kind of. And how strongly you learn these definitions depends on a few things. He talked about frequency, how often you interact. Duration, how long these interactions last over time. Priority, how early in life these associations start. And intensity.
Intensity, like how important the person teaching you is.
Yeah, the prestige of the source, the emotional connection you have, regular long-term interactions with people you respect and feel close to. That's the most powerful learning environment.
And he said this isn't some weird special way of learning crime.
Nope. It uses all the same mechanisms we use to learn anything else. Language, math, social skills.
Yeah.
Crime is learned the same way.
Okay, Sutherland's ideas were definitely groundbreaking, but the theory didn't just stop there. It evolved.
Right. Fast forward to 1966, you have Robert Burgess and Ronald Akers.
Well,
They took Sutherland's foundation and significantly expanded it.
how so? What did they add?
They brought in principles from behavioral psychology, specifically B.F. Skinner's ideas about reinforcement rewards and punishments driving behavior, and Albert Bandura's work on modeling and imitation, learning by watching others.
Ah, okay. So making the how of learning a bit more explicit.
Exactly. They developed what they call the differential association reinforcement theory of crime. It had four main parts.
Let's break those down. What's the first one?
First is definitions. Still central. These are the meanings, the attitudes, the rationalizations people attach to behaviors. Crime becomes likely when your definitions justify it, make it seem okay, maybe even required.
So your internal belief system about the act. Makes sense. Second.
Differential association. This is basically Sutherland's idea, the process of being exposed to those definitions through interacting with others. Who are you hanging out with? What are they teaching you, directly or indirectly?
Okay. And the third part they added.
Imitation. This is Bandura's influence. We learn by watching others. So you see someone commit a crime, maybe they get away with it, maybe they even get status or rewards for it.
And you might copy them.
You might, especially if you admire them or see positive outcomes. It's a powerful learning mechanism.
And the fourth. That's the reinforcement part.
Yes, differential reinforcement. This is Skinner. It's all about consequences. Behaviors that are rewarded are more likely to be repeated.
Yeah.
Behaviors that are punished are less likely.
Can you give an example of how that works with crime?
Sure. Say someone shoplifts. If their friends think it's cool and praise them, that's positive reinforcement. They're more likely to do it again.
Oh.
Or maybe shoplifting gets them accepted by a group they want to join and stops others from picking on them. That's removing something negative, the bullying, which is negative reinforcement.
Mm.
It also makes the behavior more likely to happen again. Both types of reinforcement strengthen the criminal behavior.
So it's not just about learning the idea, it's about the consequences you experience or see others experience.
Precisely. It adds that behavioral feedback loop to Sutherland's original concept.
Now, so far we've mostly talked about individual learning, within small groups, but Akers and Burgess also looked bigger picture, right?
They did. They realized that these individual learning processes don't happen in a vacuum. They're influenced by the larger social structure. This led to their social, structural, and social learning theory.
Okay, so connecting the individual learning to the macro, the way society is organized.
Exactly. Think about things like widespread poverty or really dense populations or lack of opportunity. These larger social conditions can create environments where people are just more likely to encounter and learn from others who hold those definitions favorable to crime.
Why? Because of strain or frustration, maybe? Fewer legitimate paths?
That's part of it. Strain, frustration, lack of opportunity. It can push people towards groups where crime is seen as a viable, maybe even a rational response. So the social structure itself shapes the learning environment.
And they identified specific structural factors that influence this.
Yes, they outlined four key aspects of the social structure that affect social learning. First is differential social organization, basically how different communities are organized. Some communities have strong schools, lots of community groups, stable populations. They tend to discourage crime. Others might have high poverty, lots of people moving in and out, weak institutions.
Which might inadvertently create more opportunities to learn deviant behavior.
Right. Less social control, maybe more exposure to criminal influences. Second factor, differential location in the social structure.
Okay, this sounds like where you fit in society. Class, race, gender, age.
Exactly. Your position affects who you interact with, what opportunities you have, what norms you're exposed to. A young person in a low-income area with few job prospects might be more exposed to, say, the drug trade through their network than someone in a wealthy suburb.
Makes sense. What's third?
Theoretically defined structural variables. These are the big-picture social factors that research consistently links to crime rates, things like socioeconomic status overall, family structures in a community, levels of urbanization.
So things like high unemployment rates or lots of single-parent households in an area might correlate with higher delinquency.
Research suggests they often do, yeah. Not necessarily causing it directly, but creating conditions where social controls might be weaker and association with delinquent peers might be more likely.
And the last one.
Differential social location in groups. This brings it back to the individual, but focuses on their specific memberships. Who are your family, your friends, your subculture?
So even within a broader social structure, your specific group matters most.
Immensely. A teen hanging out with a group that thinks petty theft is normal is way more likely to shoplift, regardless of the wider neighborhood stats, compared to a teen involved in, say, chess club. It's about the specific values learned in that primary group.
Okay, that provides a really comprehensive picture, from the individual right up to the whole society. So how does this whole theory stack up when we evaluate it? Let's start with logic. Does it make sense?
Well, logically, it's pretty compelling, wouldn't you say? It gives a really plausible account of how our social worlds shape us.
Yeah, the idea that we're embedded in networks of influence feels very real. And the core insight that people have to learn that crime is okay or even desirable in certain contexts, that feels important.
Definitely. And adding the reinforcement and imitation ideas from Akers and Burgess really strengthened the how. It made the learning process clearer.
But are there logical critiques?
Oh, sure. A big one is whether it leans too heavily on external factors. Does it downplay individual choice, agency? Does it feel a bit deterministic?
Like your environment just programs you.
Some critics argue it can come across that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, early versions, maybe Sutherland's original propositions, could seem a bit simplistic about the definitions. Are they really just binary good or bad?
Right. What about situations where you think something is generally wrong, but okay this time? Like fighting is bad, but you defend your sister.
Exactly. Those complex justifications, sometimes called techniques of neutralization, weren't fully captured in the earliest forms. People are often more nuanced in their thinking than a simple favorable or unfavorable definition allows.
Okay, so some logical wrinkles. What about empirical evidence? Does the research actually support the theory?
This is where it gets pretty strong support, actually. Moderate to strong, most reviews say. Study after study finds that associating with delinquent peers is a major predictor of engaging in crime yourself.
Like one of the best predictors.
Some research suggests exactly that, yes. The more regular, the more intense your contact with law-violating groups, the higher your own likelihood of offending tends to be.
And we see this in families too, right? Criminality running in families.
Yeah, parental deviance is a predictor for child deviance. Though as kids get older, peer influence often overtakes family influence, especially in adolescence.
And things like gang membership seem like a clear example.
Absolutely. Gangs provide that frequent, intense, long-lasting association with definitions favorable to crime, plus reinforcement and role models. The link is very consistent in research.
But what about the chicken or egg thing? Do bad friends make you bad, or do kids who are already leaning towards trouble just find each other?
That's a crucial question. And the contemporary view is, well, it's probably both.
Ah, so peers can definitely influence you towards crime.
And individuals with certain tendencies or in certain situations might actively seek out peers who share or validate those tendencies. It's likely a two-way street.
Okay, so logical strengths and some critiques, but generally solid empirical backing. What about its usefulness? Its practical utility?
Well, this is where the theory gets quite hopeful in a way, if crime is learned.
It can be unlearned or modified.
Exactly. It points towards rehabilitation and correction, not just punishment. It suggests interventions can work by changing those learned patterns of thinking and behaving.
Does it connect to specific therapies?
Very much so. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT models fit really well with social learning principles, helping people identify and change the thoughts, attitudes, and skills that lead to criminal behavior.
Are there real-world programs based on this?
Yes, quite a few. The materials mention the Oregon Social Learning Center, OSLC, They run programs, for instance, that train parents in better discipline and communication techniques.
And help teenagers develop pro-social skills instead of antisocial ones.
Right. Working on communication, problem solving, resisting peer pressure. Another example is the great program Gang Resistance Education and Training.
What does that do?
It works with young people to build negative views of gangs and positive views of alternatives, like trusting police, developing refusal skills. Evaluations suggest it can shift attitudes in a positive direction.
So the theory isn't just academic. It has led to actual interventions aimed at changing learned behavior.
Definitely. It provides a clear rationale for why those kinds of programs should work.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, social learning theory offers this a really powerful lens, doesn't it? It forces us to look at crime not just as an individual failing, but as something learned within our closest circles.
Yeah, it really highlights the role of family, friends, peers, the people who teach us, often implicitly, what's acceptable and what isn't. It moves beyond simple explanations.
It makes you realize how deeply interconnected we are, how much those social networks shape us, for good and for ill.
Absolutely. It shows how those circles are constantly acting as educators, shaping all sorts of behaviors, not just criminal ones.
That leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it, for you listening? If our environments, our connections, are such powerful teachers, what does that mean for our collective responsibility?
Hmm. How could we, maybe more consciously, build environments and relationships that teach pro-social behavior, that actively promote well-being?
Instead of inadvertently creating conditions where crime seems like a reasonable lesson to learn, what kind of social curriculum really are we setting up for the next generation?
That's a heavy thought to end on. What are we actually teaching?